Before there was Freya, before the necklace, before the cats pulling chariots, there was only silence. Imagine lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and wondering what existed before existence itself. The Norse myths say that, in the beginning, there was a yawning void called Ginnungagap, a gap so wide, so empty, so boring, that even insomniacs would have fallen asleep staring into it. But slowly, very slowly, things began to stir. On one side of the gap was the land of fire, Muspelheim, glowing like an eternal furnace. On the other side was the land of ice, Niflheim, colder than the toes of someone who forgot their socks in a Scandinavian winter. When fire and ice met in the middle, they didn't argue, they melted and froze and dripped together, creating the first giant, Ymir. Ymir was not exactly glamorous. He was sweaty, enormous, and constantly producing more beings from his body. From his armpits came other giants. Yes, armpits. The dawn of the Norse gods was not elegant. It was sweaty and strange. Then came the cow Audhumla, who licked salty ice blocks until a man named Buri appeared. Buri would become the ancestor of the gods. So, in case you're keeping track, the Norse pantheon begins with a sweaty giant and a cow licking ice. Not exactly the romantic start you'd expect for the goddess of love. But this is the charm of Norse mythology. It's messy, it's weird, and it's oddly comforting. Like a bedtime story, where the details are so strange you can't help but chuckle before drifting off. From these beginnings, the Aesir gods would rise, Odin, Thor, and the rest. And eventually, from the Vanir side of things, Freya would be born. But before we get to her, we must linger here, in the gentle dawn, where fire and ice first kissed, where cows licked ice, and where giants sweated new life into the world. It's slow, it's strange, and it's the perfect way to begin a story that will take us through love, war, magic, cats, necklaces, and the end of the world itself. Prepare yourself, and like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments from where you're watching from. The Vanir were a tribe of gods, different from the Aesir, while the Aesir, Odin, Thor, etc., were all about war, power, and ruling. The Vanir were more about fertility, nature, and prosperity. Think of them as the gods who cared about crops, peace, and making sure people didn't starve. Freya was born into this world of abundance. Her father was Enjar, a god of the sea, wealth, and fishing luck. Her mother's identity is a little mysterious. Some sources say it was a giantess. Others leave it vague, as if the storytellers themselves got sleepy and forgot to write it down. But what matters is that Freya was born into a family where prosperity flowed like rivers, and beauty was as natural as the blooming fields. From the very beginning, Freya embodied contradictions. She was radiant, but also fierce, gentle, but also destined to be tied to war. It's almost as if the universe said, let's make a goddess who can handle both weddings and battlefields. That'll keep things interesting. Her name itself means lady, which sounds polite and simple. But in Norse mythology, titles carried weight. She wasn't just a lady, she was the lady, the one who would later be invoked in matters of love, desire, fertility, and fate. Picture the Vanir realm, misty fields, rivers flowing, crops growing, and a newborn goddess whose golden hair shimmered like sunlight. It's peaceful, it's slow, and it's the kind of scene you can imagine while drifting off to sleep. Freya's birth wasn't marked by thunder or chaos. It was gentle, like the rising of dawn, and yet, hidden in that gentleness was the promise of drama, necklaces, tears of gold, falcon cloaks, and cat chariots. The Norse gods were not always united. In fact, the Aesir and the Vanir spent years locked in a bitter war. The Aesir, led by Odin, were the gods of ruling, power, and battle. They thrived on strength, strategy, and dominance. The Vanir, where Freya came from, were the gods of fertility, prosperity, and nature. They cared about crops, peace, and the rhythms of the earth. It was inevitable that these two groups would clash. One side wanted to conquer, the other side wanted to nurture. The war was long, exhausting, and strangely balanced. Neither side could gain the upper hand. Imagine two families arguing across the dinner table for years, throwing insults, magic, and weapons back and forth, until everyone was too tired to keep going. The gods themselves grew weary of endless conflict. Even Odin, who thrived on war, realized that this battle was draining more than it was giving. So, the two tribes decided to make peace. But Norse gods never did things the simple way. Instead of signing a treaty or shaking hands, they exchanged hostages. The Vanir sent their finest, Freya, her brother Freyr, and their father Enjar. In return, the Aesir sent a few of their own to live among the Vanir. It was like a divine exchange program, except instead of learning new languages or trying foreign food, they were learning new magic and new ways of ruling. This treaty was more than just a truce. It was the beginning of blending two worlds. The Aesir gained wisdom in fertility and prosperity, while the Vanir learned the arts of war and governance. And most importantly, it brought Freya into Asgard. From that moment, she would become one of the most beloved and influential goddesses in Norse mythology, shaping the fate of gods and mortals alike. The peace between the tribes also meant they could finally focus on bigger problems, giants threatening their lands, the mysteries of fate, and the looming shadow of Ragnarok. For now, though, the gods rested. The war was over, and the dawn of cooperation had begun. It's a reminder that even gods get tired of fighting. Sometimes the best solution is not victory, but compromise, and sharing your best people to build something stronger together. When the peace treaty between the Aesir and Vanir was finally sealed, the gods exchanged hostages to prove their commitment. Among those sent from the Vanir was Freya, her brother Freyr, and their father Near. This moment was more than just a political gesture. It was the beginning of Freya's new life in Asgard, the shining realm of the Aesir. Asgard was a place of grandeur, filled with halls that glittered with gold, warriors who trained endlessly, and gods who thrived on power and prestige. For Freya, stepping into this world was like moving from a quiet countryside into the busiest city imaginable. The Aesir were loud, proud, and constantly preparing for battle. The Vanir, by contrast, had been more peaceful, more connected to the rhythms of nature. Freya's arrival was not unnoticed. Her beauty was said to be so radiant that even the sternest warriors paused to admire her. She carried herself with grace, but also with a quiet strength that made it clear she was not simply a decoration in the halls of Asgard. She was a goddess with power, wisdom, and influence. The Aesir quickly realized that Freya brought something they lacked: mastery of seer, the art of magic and prophecy. Odin himself would later learn this craft from her, proving that even the Allfather needed guidance from the goddess of love and war. Freya's presence enriched Asgard, blending the fertility and prosperity of the Vanir with the strength and authority of the Aesir. Her brother Freyr became associated with kingship and prosperity, while her father Enjar brought blessings of the sea and wealth. But it was Freya who stood out most of all. She became a bridge between two worlds, embodying the peace that had been forged and the promise of cooperation between the tribes. Life in Asgard was not always easy. The Aesir were wary at first, suspicious of their former enemies. Yet Freya's charm, wisdom, and undeniable power slowly won them over. She was not just a guest, she became one of the most important figures in their pantheon. And so, Freya's journey into Asgard marked the beginning of her rise. From this point forward, she would play a central role in the myths of love, desire, magic, and even war. The goddess who had been born in the fertile lands of the Vanir now stood in the halls of the Aesir, ready to shape the destiny of gods and mortals alike. Freya was not only the goddess of love and beauty, she was also the greatest mistress of magic in the Norse world. Her specialty was a powerful form of sorcery called seer. This was not the kind of magic where you wave a wand and rabbits appear. Seer was deeper, stranger, and more unsettling. It was about weaving fate, bending destiny, and peering into the threads of the future. The practice of seer was considered both wondrous and scandalous. It allowed its user to see what was coming, to alter events, and to influence the minds of others. Freya wielded it with ease, as if she were born with the ability to tug at the strings of reality itself. She could foretell the future, bless fertility, or curse enemies. In her hands, seer was both a gift and a weapon. What made this art controversial was that it was often seen as unmanly. For warriors and kings, wielding swords and spears was honorable, but weaving fate with magic, that was suspicious. Yet Freya did not care. She was the goddess of love and war, and scandal was practically part of her job description. Even Odin, the Allfather, recognized the power of seer. He wanted to learn it, and it was Freya who taught him. Imagine the king of the gods sitting down like a student, while Freya patiently explained how to twist destiny. It was a remarkable moment. The most powerful of the Aesir, learning from the goddess who had come from the Vanir. Without Freya, Odin would never have mastered this art. Seer was not just about prophecy, it was also about transformation. Freya could change her shape, travel across realms, and cloak herself in mystery. Her falcon feather cloak, which we'll explore later, was one of the tools that allowed her to fly across the skies. With Seer, she became untouchable, a goddess who could slip between worlds and bend the rules of existence. For mortals, Seer was both feared and revered. Some sought Freya's blessings, hoping she would grant fertility or prosperity. Others feared her curses, knowing that a goddess who could weave fate could also unravel it. In every way, her magic made her more than just a goddess of beauty. It made her a force of destiny. And so Freya's mastery of Seer became one of her defining traits. She was not only the goddess of love, desire, and fertility, but also the goddess who could see beyond the present, who could alter the course of lives, and who could teach even Odin himself. Her magic was the thread that tied her to both the Vanir and the Aesir, and it ensured that her influence would never fade. When Freya settled into Asgard, she quickly became known not just as a guest from the Vanir, but as a goddess whose presence could not be ignored. Her beauty was legendary. It was said that her golden hair shimmered like sunlight. Her eyes held the depth of oceans, and her very presence could soften the hardest warrior's heart. Even in a realm filled with gods and goddesses, Freya stood apart. But beauty alone was not her gift. Freya embodied love, desire, and passion in all their forms. She was invoked by lovers seeking affection, by couples hoping for children, and even by kings who wanted their people to prosper. To call upon Freya was to invite warmth, fertility, and joy into one's life. Her influence stretched far beyond romance. In Norse culture, love was not just about tenderness, it was tied to survival. Fertility meant crops growing, families thriving, and communities enduring the harsh winters. Freya's role as the goddess of desire was therefore practical as well as emotional. She was the spark that kept life moving forward. Of course, being the goddess of love also meant she was often the subject of gossip. Loki, the trickster god, never missed a chance to tease her, accusing her of being too generous with her affections. Yet even his sharp tongue could not diminish her importance. Freya was not a goddess to be dismissed. She was central to the balance of the Norse world. Her duality made her fascinating. She could inspire tenderness and longing, but she also carried the strength of war within her. To love Freya was to understand that passion could be both gentle and fierce. She was the goddess who reminded mortals and gods alike that desire is not a weakness, it is a force that drives creation, ambition, and destiny. In the halls of Asgard, Freya became a symbol of beauty and power combined. She was admired, respected, and sometimes feared, for her gifts could bless or overwhelm. And as the stories unfolded, her role as the goddess of love and desire would intertwine with tales of magic, loss, and even battle. Freya's story is not only about beauty, magic, and power. It is also about sorrow. For all her radiance, she carried a grief that was so profound it shimmered in the form of golden tears. These tears were not ordinary. They fell like drops of precious metal, glistening as they touched the earth. The source of her sorrow was her husband, Opi. He was a mysterious figure, often described as a wanderer who left Freya to travel far and wide. Some tales say he was cursed, others suggest he simply could not stay still. Whatever the reason, his absence left Freya heartbroken. She searched for him across the realms, wandering through distant lands, calling his name and hoping to find him. Wherever she went, her tears fell, and the ground was blessed with gold. Imagine a goddess walking through forests, mountains, and villages, crying so beautifully that her sadness literally enriched the soil. It's tragic, but also strangely practical. Her grief became treasure. The image of Freya weeping golden tears is one of the most famous in Norse mythology. It shows her humanity, even as a goddess. She was not immune to loss or longing. Her love for OPR was so deep that it transformed her sorrow into something eternal. OPR himself remains a mystery. Some scholars believe he was simply another name for Odin, the Allfather, suggesting that Freya's grief was tied to the wanderings of the chief god. Others think he was a separate figure, a shadowy husband who slipped away into the unknown. The myths do not give us clarity, only the enduring image of Freya's tears. For mortals, this story carried meaning. It reminded them that even gods suffer, that love can bring both joy and pain, and that beauty can emerge from sorrow. Freya's golden tears were not just symbols of grief, they were symbols of the preciousness of love itself. And so, the goddess of love, desire, and war was also the goddess of longing. Her tears fell like gold, her sorrow became legend, and her search for OPR echoed through the ages. Behind Freya's golden tears lies the mystery of her husband, OPR. He is one of the most puzzling figures in Norse mythology, a man who seems to exist more in absence than in presence. Unlike Odin, Thor, or Loki, OPR does not have a long list of adventures or battles. Instead, his story is defined by wandering, disappearance, and the grief he left behind. OPR was said to be deeply loved by Freya. Their bond was strong, but for reasons never fully explained, he left her. Some tales describe him as a restless traveler, roaming far and wide across the realms. Others suggest he was cursed, doomed to wander endlessly. And then there are scholars who believe OPR was simply another name for Odin, the Allfather, disguised in myth. If that were true, it would mean Freya's sorrow was tied to the wanderings of the chief god himself. Whatever the truth, Okir's absence became the defining feature of their relationship. Freya searched for him tirelessly, traveling through distant lands, calling his name, and weeping golden tears wherever she went. Her grief was so profound that it became part of her legend. Mortals told stories of her sorrow, and they imagined her tears falling like drops of treasure, enriching the earth even as her heart remained broken. Okir's shadowy nature makes him fascinating. He is not a warrior god, nor a trickster, nor a ruler. He is simply the husband who left, the figure who inspired one of the most poignant images in Norse mythology. His role reminds us that even gods are not immune to loss, longing, and heartbreak. For Freya, OPR was more than a husband. He was the embodiment of love's fragility. His absence showed that desire and devotion can bring both joy and pain. Her endless search for him became a symbol of loyalty, passion, and the sorrow that comes when love slips away. And so, OPR remains a mystery. Was he Odin in disguise? Was he a wanderer cursed to roam forever? Or was he simply a story meant to explain why the goddess of love wept golden tears? The myths do not give us certainty, only the enduring image of Freya's devotion to a husband who could not stay. Among all the treasures of the Norse gods, few were as dazzling or as famous as Brísingamen, the necklace of Freya. It was said to shine with such brilliance that it could light up a hall, a battlefield, or even the darkest winter night. Wherever Freya went, the necklace was a symbol of her beauty, her power, and her irresistible charm. The story of Brísingamen begins with 4 dwarves, master craftsmen, who lived deep beneath the earth. These dwarves were known for creating objects of incredible power, weapons, jewels, and artifacts that could rival the gods themselves. When they forged Brísingamen, it was no ordinary necklace. It was a masterpiece, a chain of gold and gems that shimmered with magic, radiating desire and allure. Freya saw the necklace and wanted it more than anything. It wasn't just about beauty. Brísingamen carried a power that enhanced her role as the goddess of love and desire. Wearing it made her presence even more irresistible, her influence even stronger. But the dwarves were not willing to give it away for free. The tale goes that Freya bargained with them, and the price was unusual. She would spend one night with each of the 4 dwarves in exchange for the necklace. Scandalous, yes, but in Norse mythology, bargains were often strange, and gods frequently paid unusual prices for treasures. Odin gave up an eye for wisdom, Thor dressed as a bride to recover his hammer, and Freya gave herself to the dwarves for Brísingamen. When she finally obtained the necklace, it became one of her most prized possessions. She wore it proudly, and it became a symbol of her dual nature, beauty and desire, but also cunning and determination. Freya was willing to pay any price for what she wanted, and Brísingamen was worth it. The necklace also became the subject of gossip and conflict. Loki, the trickster, often mocked her for the way she acquired it. Some stories even tell of him stealing it, causing chaos until it was returned. Yet, despite the drama, Brísingamen remained with Freya, glowing as a reminder of her power and her choices. For mortals, the story of Brísingamen carried meaning to it, showed that beauty and desire come with costs, that treasures are rarely gained without sacrifice, and that even gods must bargain for what they want. And so, Brísingamen was more than just jewelry. It was a symbol of Freya herself, radiant, powerful, controversial, and unforgettable. The necklace of Brísingamen was dazzling, powerful, and unforgettable. But treasures in Norse mythology never come without a cost. For Freya, the price she paid to obtain Brísingamen was one of the most talked about bargains in all the sagas. The four dwarves who forged the necklace were not ordinary craftsmen. They were cunning, clever, and knew the value of their creation. When Freya asked for Brísingamen, they refused to simply hand it over. Gold, jewels, or promises were not enough. Instead, they demanded something far more personal, that Freya spend one night with each of them. It was a shocking price, even by the standards of Norse mythology, where gods often traded eyes, disguises, or entire identities for what they wanted. Odin gave up an eye for wisdom. Thor once dressed as a bride to recover his hammer, and Freya gave herself to the dwarves for the necklace. Each god had their sacrifice, and this was hers. Freya agreed, and after 4 nights, the necklace was hers. She wore it proudly, knowing that its beauty and power would enhance her role as the goddess of love, desire, and fertility. Yet the bargain was not without consequences. Loki, the trickster, never missed a chance to remind her of the price she had paid. He mocked her, spread gossip, and even stole the necklace in some versions of the tale, forcing the gods to intervene to return it. The story of Brísingamen became more than just a tale of jewelry. It was a reminder that even gods must make sacrifices, that desire often comes with a cost, and that power is rarely gained without compromise. For Freya, the necklace symbolized both her determination and her vulnerability. She wanted it, she paid for it, and she bore the weight of that choice. Mortals who heard the story saw it as a lesson to beauty and desire are powerful, but they are not free. Every treasure, whether a necklace or a dream, requires something in return. Freya's bargain with the dwarves was scandalous, yes, but it also showed her strength. She was willing to endure judgment and gossip for the sake of what she valued most. And so, Brísingamen was not just a necklace. It was a story of sacrifice, of choices made, and of the price that even a goddess must pay to hold on to what she desires. Among Freya's many treasures, few were as mysterious and useful as her falcon feather cloak. This was no ordinary garment. It shimmered with feathers that seemed to catch the light of dawn. And when Freya wore it, she could transform herself into a falcon and fly across the skies. The cloak was a symbol of freedom and mobility. While other gods relied on horses, ships, or even rainbow bridges to travel, Freya could simply slip into her cloak and soar above the world. Imagine the goddess of love and war gliding gracefully over mountains and seas, feathers rustling in the wind, her eyes sharp as she searched for her lost husband or carried out her magical tasks. The cloak was also practical. In Norse mythology, travel was never easy. Giants lurked in distant lands, seas were treacherous, and realms were separated by vast distances. With her falcon cloak, Freya could bypass these obstacles, moving swiftly between worlds. It made her a messenger, a seeker, and a wanderer all at once. Other gods admired the cloak too. In some stories, they even borrowed it. Loki, the trickster, was known to use Freya's cloak when he needed to move quickly or escape trouble. It's easy to imagine him sneaking into her hall, grabbing the cloak, and flying off, while Freya rolled her eyes at yet another of his antics. The falcon cloak also tied into her mastery of seer, the magic of transformation and prophecy. It was not just a garment, but an extension of her power, allowing her to slip between forms and realms. With it, she became untouchable, a goddess who could move unseen, who could watch from above, and who could act when others were bound by the limits of the earth. For mortals, the image of Freya in her falcon cloak was both enchanting and intimidating. She was the goddess who could appear suddenly, who could vanish into the skies, and who could see what others could not. Her cloak was a reminder that love, desire, and magic were not confined to the ground. They soared, they transformed, and they reached beyond the ordinary. And so, the falcon feather cloak became one of Freya's most iconic possessions. It was a garment of beauty, a tool of magic, and a symbol of her freedom. Whether searching for OPR, teaching Odinseer, or simply gliding across the skies, Freya's cloak carried her wherever destiny called. If there is one detail about Freya that makes her instantly unforgettable, it is her chariot pulled by cats. Yes, cats, not horses, not wolves, not dragons, but cats. And not the tiny, fluffy kittens you might imagine curling up on your lap, but large, strong, majestic cats capable of hauling a goddess across the skies. The image is both adorable and absurd. Picture Freya, the goddess of love and war, riding proudly in her golden chariot, while two enormous cats trot along, whiskers twitching, tails swishing, occasionally stopping to lick their paws or chase something shiny. It's the kind of detail that makes Norse mythology feel both epic and strangely cozy. The cat-drawn chariot symbolized more than just transportation. Cats were sacred to Freya, representing independence, mystery, and quiet strength. Unlike dogs, who are loyal and eager, cats are aloof, graceful, and unpredictable qualities that matched Freya herself. She was a goddess who could be tender and loving one moment, fierce and untouchable the next. Her cats reflected that duality perfectly. In some tales, mortals would invoke Freya's cats for blessings of fertility and prosperity. Farmers, for example, saw cats as protectors of grain stores, keeping mice away and ensuring survival through harsh winters. By riding a chariot pulled by cats, Freya connected herself to everyday life, reminding people that even the goddess of love and war cared about the humble creatures that guarded their food. The chariot also carried symbolic weight in battle. Imagine warriors looking up and seeing Freya's chariot streaking across the sky, pulled by cats. It was both inspiring and intimidating. Her presence meant that love and war were intertwined, that beauty and ferocity could arrive together, carried by creatures who were as mysterious as the goddess herself. And of course, the chariot added a touch of humor to her legend. While Thor thundered across the skies, with goats pulling his cart, Freya glided with cats. It was a reminder that not all gods needed brute force. Some relied on elegance, charm, and a little feline attitude. So, the cat-drawn chariot became one of Freya's most iconic symbols. It was adorable, powerful, and unforgettable, a perfect reflection of the goddess who embodied love, desire, magic, and war, all while riding in style. Freya was not only the goddess of love and beauty, she was also the goddess of fertility, a role that made her essential to both gods and mortals. In the harsh landscapes of the Norse world, fertility was not just about romance or children. It was about survival. Crops had to grow, animals had to thrive, and families had to endure the long winters. Freya's blessings were the difference between abundance and famine. Her presence was invoked in marriages, in planting seasons, and in childbirth. Farmers prayed to her for fertile fields, couples called upon her for children, and communities looked to her for prosperity. She was the goddess who ensured that life continued, that the cycle of growth and renewal never stopped. Freya's connection to fertility was also tied to her dual nature. She embodied desire and passion, but she also represented the nurturing force that sustains life. In her, love was not just an emotion, it was a power that created and preserved. Her influence stretched from the intimacy of lovers to the vast fields of grain that fed entire villages. Animals were sacred to her as well. Cats, of course, were her companions, but she was also associated with boars, symbols of fertility and strength. The boar was a creature of abundance, tied to the earth and its cycles. By linking herself to these animals, Freya became a goddess who bridged the natural and the divine. Her role in fertility also connected her to prophecy and magic. Through seer, she could foresee the future of families, crops, and kingdoms. She could bless or curse, ensuring prosperity or withholding it. This made her both beloved and feared. To honor Freya was to invite abundance. To neglect her was to risk barrenness. For mortals, Freya's powers were deeply practical. In a world where survival depended on the fertility of land and people, her blessings were vital. She was not just a goddess of romance, but a goddess of life itself. Her influence touched every seed planted, every child born, and every harvest gathered. And so, Freya's powers of fertility became one of her most enduring legacies. She was the goddess who ensured that love blossomed, that families grew, and that the earth itself remained generous. In her, desire and survival were woven together, reminding mortals that passion and prosperity are two sides of the same coin. Freya was not only the goddess of love, beauty, and fertility, she was also one of the most powerful figures in the realm of magic and prophecy. Her mastery of seer, the mystical art of weaving fate, made her unique among the gods. While warriors swung swords and kings ruled kingdoms, Freya quietly bent the threads of destiny, shaping outcomes in ways that even Odin respected. Seer was a strange and unsettling practice. It allowed its user to see into the future, to alter events, and to influence the minds of others. Freya wielded it with elegance, as if she were born with the ability to tug at the strings of reality itself. She could bless fertility, curse enemies, or foretell the fate of entire kingdoms. In her hands, prophecy was not just prediction, it was power. Her role in prophecy was deeply tied to her identity. As the goddess of desire, she understood the passions that drove mortals and gods alike. Through seer, she could see where those passions would lead, whether to joy, sorrow, or destruction. Her visions were not always comforting. Sometimes they revealed the inevitability of loss, the certainty of war, or the shadow of Ragnarok. Yet even in these darker prophecies, Freya's presence was steady, reminding mortals that fate could be faced with courage. Odin himself learned seer from Freya. This was remarkable, because Odin was the All-Father, the ruler of the Aesir, and yet he humbled himself to study under her. It showed that Freya's knowledge was indispensable, that even the greatest of gods needed her guidance. Without her, Odin's mastery of prophecy would have been incomplete. Freya's role in magic also made her a figure of both reverence and suspicion. Some admired her gifts, seeking her blessings for prosperity and love. Others feared her, knowing that a goddess who could weave fate could also unravel it. In Norse society, seer was sometimes seen as scandalous, especially for men. But Freya embraced it fully, turning what others considered shameful into a source of strength. Her influence extended beyond the gods. Mortals believed that invoking Freya could bring visions, fertility, or protection. She was a bridge between the divine and the human, her magic touching every level of existence. Whether in the halls of Asgard or the homes of farmers, her role in prophecy was felt everywhere. And so, Freya's mastery of magic and prophecy became one of her defining traits. She was not only the goddess of love and desire, but also the goddess who could see beyond the present, who could alter the course of lives, and who could teach even Odin himself. Her magic was the thread that tied her to both the Vanir and the Aesir, ensuring that her influence would never fade. In Norse mythology, death in battle was not the end. It was the beginning of a new journey. Warriors who fell bravely on the battlefield were believed to be chosen by the gods to dwell in the afterlife. Odin's great hall, where half of the slain warriors went to feast, fight, and prepare for Ragnarok. But fewer realize that the other half did not go to Odin at all. They went to Freya. Yes, the goddess of love, beauty, and desire also presided over the dead. Her hall was called Folkvanger, and it was said to be just as glorious as Valhalla. While Odin gathered his chosen warriors, Freya claimed the rest. The arrangement was simple: half for Odin, half for Freya. It was like a divine partnership, though one imagines Odin might have grumbled occasionally about sharing. Freya's role in the afterlife shows her dual nature. She was not only the goddess of tenderness and fertility, but also of war and death. She welcomed the fallen with grace, offering them a place in her hall. To die bravely in battle was to earn her favor, and many warriors hoped to be chosen by her. What made Freya's claim unique was the balance it represented. Odin's Valhalla was about endless fighting and feasting, a warrior's paradise. Freya's Folkvanger, by contrast, was quieter, gentler, and perhaps more peaceful. It was a reminder that even in death, love and war were intertwined. Some warriors sought glory in Odin's hall, while others found rest in Freya's embrace. The idea that half of the fallen went to Freya also elevated her status among the gods. She was not just a goddess of romance or fertility. She was a goddess who commanded the loyalty of warriors, who shared in the destiny of the brave. Her influence stretched from the fields of love to the fields of battle, and even into the halls of the dead. For mortals, this belief carried comfort. It meant that no matter where they fell, they might be chosen by Freya, welcomed into her hall, and honored for their courage. Her presence in the afterlife was a reminder that love and beauty do not vanish with death, they endure offering solace even in the darkest moments. And so, Freya's claim to half the fallen warriors became one of her most powerful roles. She was the goddess who embraced both life and death, desire and war, tenderness and ferocity. In her, the cycle was complete, and the fallen found not only honor, but love. When warriors fell bravely in battle, their souls did not simply vanish into the cold winds of the north. Instead, they were claimed by the gods. Half went to Odin's mighty hall, Valhalla, where endless feasting and fighting awaited. The other half, however, were chosen by Freya, who welcomed them into her own hall, Folkvanger. Folkvanger was not as loudly celebrated as Valhalla, but it was no less magnificent. Its name means field of the people, and it was said to be a vast, fertile plain where Freya's chosen warriors gathered. Unlike Valhalla, which was filled with the clash of weapons and the roar of endless battle practice, Folkvanger carried a gentler atmosphere. It was a place of honor, but also of peace, where warriors could rest after their struggles. Freya's hall reflected her dual nature. She was the goddess of love and war, and Folkvanger embodied both. It was a sanctuary for the brave, but it was also touched by beauty, desire, and fertility. Imagine golden fields stretching endlessly, flowers blooming even in the harsh northern climate, and warriors finding solace in the presence of the goddess who had chosen them. The warriors who entered Folkvanger were not forgotten or diminished compared to those in Valhalla. They were honored equally, for Freya's claim was just as powerful as Odin's. To be chosen by her was to be embraced by love and war together, to rest in a hall where tenderness and strength coexisted. Some tales suggest that Folkvanger was quieter, more serene, a place where warriors could finally lay down their weapons and enjoy peace. Others imagine it as a hall where Freya prepared her chosen for the final battle of Ragnarok, just as Odin did in Valhalla. Either way, it was a place of destiny where the fallen found meaning beyond death. For mortals, the idea of Folkvanger carried comfort. It meant that even if Odin did not choose them, Freya might. Her hall was not about endless fighting, but about balance, a reminder that courage and love are both worthy of honor. And so, Folkvanger became one of Freya's greatest symbols. It was the hall of the chosen, the field of the brave, and the sanctuary where love and war met in harmony. In its golden plains, the fallen found not only rest, but the eternal embrace of the goddess who claimed them. No goddess in Norse mythology could escape the sharp tongue and mischief of Loki, the trickster god, and Freya, with her beauty, power, and treasures, was one of his favorite targets. Their encounters were often fiery, filled with insults, schemes, and the kind of drama that made the halls of Asgard echo with laughter and outrage. Loki was notorious for stirring trouble, and Freya's life gave him plenty of material. He mocked her for her many lovers, accused her of scandalous bargains, and never missed a chance to bring up the infamous story of the necklace Brísingamen. In the poem Lokasenna, Loki openly insults her, claiming she had been with every god and elf in the hall. It was cruel, but also typical Loki. He thrived on chaos, and Freya's reputation was an easy target. Yet Freya was not defenseless. She was a goddess of love and war, and she could hold her own against Loki's barbs. Her dignity, her power, and her influence often silenced him, even if only temporarily. Unlike some gods who lost their temper quickly, Freya's strength lay in her ability to endure his insults without losing her place in the pantheon. Their clashes also revealed the tension between beauty and trickery. Loki represented deceit, disruption, and mockery, while Freya embodied desire, fertility, and magic. When they collided, it was like watching two forces of nature spar, one with words sharp as daggers, the other with a presence too radiant to be diminished. In some tales, Loki even borrowed Freya's falcon feather cloak to carry out his schemes. Imagine him sneaking into her hall, grabbing the cloak, and flying off to cause trouble, while Freya sighed, knowing she would eventually get it back. Their relationship was a mix of rivalry, annoyance, and reluctant cooperation. For mortals, these encounters were entertaining but also symbolic. They showed that even gods had to deal with gossip, insults, and the occasional theft of personal belongings. Freya's ability to withstand Loki's mischief reminded people that dignity and resilience are powerful weapons against mockery. And so, Freya's encounters with Loki became part of her legend. She was the goddess who endured the trickster's insults, who stood firm against his chaos, and who reminded everyone that love and beauty could withstand even the sharpest tongue. Freya was not only adored by mortals for her beauty and fertility, she also held sway over heroes and kings. In the sagas, her presence was often felt in the decisions of rulers, the destinies of warriors, and the prosperity of entire kingdoms. She was more than a goddess of love. She was a force that shaped leadership and power. Kings and chieftains often invoked Freya to bless their reigns. Her association with fertility meant that prosperous harvests, thriving families, and strong armies were tied to her favor. A ruler who honored Freya could expect abundance, while one who ignored her risked famine, unrest, or worse. In this way, she became a silent partner in governance, her influence woven into the very fabric of leadership. Heroes, too, sought her blessings. In battle, courage was not enough. Destiny played its part. Freya, with her mastery of seer and prophecy, could tilt fate in their favor. To be chosen by her was to gain honor, whether in life or in death. Remember, half of the fallen warriors went to her hall, Folkvanger. That alone made her a goddess whom heroes respected deeply. Her influence was not always gentle. Freya could be demanding, and her power was not to be underestimated. In some tales, rulers who failed to honor her properly faced misfortune. Crops failed, families struggled, and kingdoms weakened. She was a goddess who reminded leaders that love, fertility, and prosperity were just as important as swords and shields. Freya's role also highlighted the balance between war and peace. Odin and Thor embodied battle and brute strength, but Freya reminded kings that prosperity came from harmony, fertility, and the cycles of nature. A wise ruler understood that both war and love were necessary to sustain a kingdom. For mortals, her influence was both inspiring and intimidating. She was the goddess who could bless a hero's quest, enrich a king's reign, or unravel it all if neglected. Her presence in the sagas showed that leadership was not just about power. It was about honoring the forces of love, fertility, and destiny. And so, Freya's influence over heroes and kings became one of her most enduring legacies. She was the goddess who shaped rulers, guided warriors, and reminded everyone that true strength comes not only from battle, but from love, prosperity, and the wisdom to honor both. Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, was the great destiny that loomed over all of Norse mythology. It was the final battle, the end of the world as the gods knew it, and the beginning of something new. Every god had a role to play in this cosmic drama, and Freya was no exception. Though she was the goddess of love, beauty, and fertility, Freya was also deeply tied to war and death. Remember, half of the fallen warriors went to her hall, Folkvanger. This meant that when Ragnarok came, she would not stand alone. She would lead her chosen warriors into battle, just as Odin would lead his from Valhalla. Together, their armies would march against the giants, monsters, and forces of chaos that threatened to consume the world. Freya's role in Ragnarok was not just about fighting. Her mastery of seer gave her insight into fate itself. She could see the threads of destiny, and she knew that Ragnarok was inevitable. Even with her power, she could not stop it, but she could prepare for it. Her magic, her warriors, and her influence all ensured that when the final battle came, she would stand ready. Her presence in Ragnarok also showed the balance of her nature. She was the goddess who embodied love and desire, yet she was also the goddess who embraced war and death. In the end, she was not only a nurturer of life, but also a defender of it, willing to fight when the survival of the cosmos was at stake. For mortals, Freya's role in Ragnarok carried a powerful message. It reminded them that love and beauty are not fragile things. They are forces strong enough to endure even the end of the world. Her warriors marched not only for glory, but for the values she represented: passion, fertility, and the eternal cycle of life and death. And so, when the fires of Ragnarok burned and the gods faced their doom, Freya stood among them. She was the goddess who wept golden tears, who rode a chariot pulled by cats, who mastered magic and prophecy, and who, in the end, fought alongside her people to face destiny itself. Freya's story stretches far beyond the myths of battles, treasures, and magic. Her true legacy lies in how she embodied the eternal balance of love and war, beauty and strength, desire and destiny. She was not just a goddess admired for her golden hair or her radiant presence. She was a force that shaped the lives of gods and mortals alike. Her influence was everywhere. In the fields, she blessed fertility and prosperity. In the halls of kings, she guided rulers toward abundance and wisdom. In battle, she claimed half of the fallen warriors, reminding everyone that courage and love were equally worthy of honor. And in the hearts of mortals, she was invoked for passion, for children, for hope, and for comfort. Freya's treasures, her necklace, Brísingamen, her falcon feather cloak, her cat-drawn chariot, all symbolized different aspects of her power. They showed that beauty could be fierce, that desire could be unstoppable, and that love could carry you across the skies. Even her golden tears for OPR became part of her legacy, teaching that sorrow and devotion are as precious as joy. Her mastery of seer ensured that her wisdom lived on. She taught Odin himself, proving that even the All-Father needed her guidance. Through magic and prophecy, she became a bridge between fate and freedom, showing that destiny could be faced with courage and grace. And when Ragnarok came, Freya stood among the gods, leading her chosen warriors from Folkvanger. Her legacy was not erased by the twilight of the gods. It endured, carried in the stories told by mortals, in the cycles of love and life, and in the eternal reminder that beauty and strength are never separate. Freya's legacy is this: she was the goddess who taught that love is not weakness, but power, that desire is not shame, but creation, that sorrow can shine like gold, and that even in the end, Love and war walk hand in hand. And now, as her story closes, let it settle gently in your mind like a lullaby. The goddess of love reminds us that beauty, passion, and courage live on in every heart. Rest easy, knowing her legacy endures in the cycles of life and dreams. Good night.